Okay folks, we need to talk about Jack White, because this story is absolutely insane. So everyone knows Jack White led the garage rock revolution in the early 2000s, and has been a musical pioneer ever since. But most people don't know that Jack White actually started his musical career on the streets of Detroit as a battle rapper. So Jack Delaney grows up in the slums of Detroit and is the only Caucasian kid in his neighborhood, earning him the nickname White Jack, which would later be changed, of course, to Jack White. And this may come as a shock to you, but before Jack White was the person you know today, he was actually in a rap duo with a young Robert James Ritchie, aka Kid Rock. Now I know you're thinking, I've never heard of Jack White and Kid Rock being friends, or any connection besides them both being from Detroit. But that's all very intentional. So in the summer of 1998, Jack and James's rap group White Kid is starting to attract some attention as an opening act for Eminem. And that's when they get spotted by Jimmy Iovine, who we all know started Eminem's career. So Jimmy Iovine immediately signs White Kid to a development deal. Now if Jack and James had known what they were signing, they would have turned and run. But unfortunately, they were young, naive rappers who were grabbing at the only branch to swing on. While Jimmy Iovine is certainly a powerful record executive that can make your career, he's equally as petty and would often choose an artist to bully or humiliate just for his own amusement. Poor Jack Delaney had no idea he was about to enter a 2-decade-long legal hellscape. So after getting signed to a development deal, Jimmy Iovine almost immediately drives a wedge between the two friends by telling them that one of them has to be the lead of this group, while the other one will remain a backup rapper and hype man. Well, Jimmy underestimated how close these two were, and they actually refused to change the power dynamics in this group. And when Jack voiced this, Jimmy decided right then and there to make Jack's life a living hell. So within a week, Jimmy has restructured the deal to be very different. He forces Jack and James to split up and put out 2 solo albums. Now, like I said, the deal they signed gave complete creative control to Jimmy, so they legally had to do what he said. And this is where it gets very cruel. You see, Jimmy allowed James to keep the name Kid Rock and record his first solo rap album, but he forced Jack to do something entirely different and record a rock and roll album, even though Jack had never even touched a guitar before. See, Jimmy wanted to force Jack to turn in an unlistenable, horribly recorded album so the label could drop him. And when Jack finally turns over the recordings after 2 months in the studio, Jimmy is elated to hear just how bad it was. It sounded like it was recorded on a tape recorder, and it was clear that whoever was playing these instruments had never heard this type of music before. He couldn't play the drums, he couldn't play the guitar, he couldn't sing, and he didn't even know to include a bass guitar on the songs. It was truly a masterpiece of inadequacy. And it's during this same time that Kid Rock's first release blows up, sending him straight to MTV. And while he continually reached out, Jack had quickly grown bitter and stopped returning his calls. Before Jack's album gets released, Jimmy puts together a listening party for his industry friends. But in this case, it's literally to mock the music, and is sold as the comedic event of a lifetime. So the listening party goes as expected, and everyone agrees this is some of the worst music that's ever been made. Jimmy is crowned as the king of cruel, and poor Jack White just has to sit there and endure it. Now, randomly attending this listening party was one Ron Days, who played the father on Gullah Gullah Island. And Ron was a good man. He saw what they were doing to Jack and he didn't like it. So Ron walks over to Jack and does a classic Billy Madison trick and starts loudly proclaiming, "I actually think this music is really cool. I think these people just don't get it." And after a few minutes, some of the tastemakers in the back of the room were agreeing. And Ron was just trying to make Jack feel better, of course. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of kindness had just set in motion an entire genre change for white people. As much as Jimmy tried to shut it down, it only took one contrarian to destabilize this room of music journalists and label executives. Cut to 2 months later, and the White Stripes are now one of the biggest bands in the world. And though Kid Rock continued to try to connect with his old buddy, Jack was now separating himself even further, claiming he'd never even met his one-time best friend when asked in interviews, and even developing a full-blown addiction to vitamin C. So now that Jack is famous, he can go back to his real passion, rap. Right? Wrong. The deal he signed with Jimmy literally prohibited him from releasing any rap music even under other names. Now, the only workaround Jack found was that he could write rhymes for other artists, as long as its genre wasn't designated as rap. And that's where the rap rock legal loophole came from, and why Jack White has songwriting credits on almost every Linkin Park album. Jack even wrote every lyric for the Executioner's Linkin Park crossover hit It's Going Down. "It's going down. Put it out for the world to see, LP and X-Men to the 10th degree." It's pretty obvious that these lines were penned by Jack White. In fact, Jack was so heavily involved and credited in their song catalog that he's actually the reason the band hasn't been able to reform or continue on, because legally speaking, they need Jack's approval. And it appears Jack has become the abuser of power, because he basically just did to Linkin Park what was done to him, by forcing them to take on a female Scientologist to replace the core identity of the band. And while those close to him would blame his vitamin C addiction, it was clear Jack had changed. And in a bizarre recent interview, Mike Shinoda told ABC News he had been willing to do whatever it took to get the band back together, and that after doing an Amazonian Waje ceremony, Jack White had finally given his blessings for the band to continue. Now, online sleuthers quickly looked up this Waje ceremony, and apparently it's a ritual that cleanses you of a personal debt if you stay awake for 3 days and eat human feces, which sounds insane, so I looked it up, and apparently this is not a real thing. It was just some BS online story going around the internet at the time, so it seems like Mike Shinoda was duped in this case. Now, there's tons more about this guy, including him now mirroring Kid Rock by moving to Nashville and pursuing the blues, but we'll have to save that for another time. So for now, Jack White, you're a total bitch. Okay guys, let me know who you want me to cover next, and don't get fooled by the trolls out there saying this page is inaccurate. Anyone saying that probably works for network television news.